Off-roaders have been using the radio waves to communicate with each other since the 1960s, when a revolution in solid-state electronics allowed the production of cheap, portable citizens band radios, otherwise known as CB. By the 1970s, every off-road rig in the country had a CB radio installed. 10-4, good buddy, became the catchphrase of the 70s. I mean, watch Smokey and the Bandit to see for yourself how ingrained the CB radio was in American society in the 70s. By the 1980s, mobile ham radios became readily available, but they were expensive, highly complex, and required the operator to pass a difficult test to get a license, which included learning Morse code. So CB radios continued to be the official communication system of the off-road world. But today, in 2019, the off-road world is making a shift in communications for the first time, I think, in off-road history. Almost every rock buggy I wheel with nowadays uses 2-meter radios to communicate with each other. Hundreds of off-road clubs across the country are switching their members over to matching race radios. And $25 Baofeng radios are the new norm in the hands of people at off-road races and events. But as the off-road community rapidly gravitates away from CB radio, almost nobody truly understands the nuances of these alternative communications that they might be using. This video is not about hardcore ham radio usage. It's not about DXing, hitting repeaters, or any complicated radio theory. In the context of this video, we're only discussing vehicle-to-vehicle communication by off-road rigs on the trail. In the ham radio world, when 2 or more vehicles are communicating with each other on the same frequency, this is known as simplex, and that's what we're talking about here. And what you need to be mindful of in this video is that 90% of the rigs out there communicating with each other on anything other than a CB radio are currently doing so illegally. Myself, I'm a licensed amateur radio operator, but I'm not going to degrade or belittle anybody who isn't. You know, I'm not one of those ham snobs that lives his life trying to find people to report to the FCC. You know, it's up to the individual to decide what they want to do, and I'm in no way promoting or encouraging any illegal activity in this video. So sit back, pop open a frosty beverage, and learn something about the current state of off-road communications. The benefits of a CB radio is that they're cheap, easy to install, easy to use, and require no license to operate. Installed correctly, the range of your average unmodified CB radio is more than enough for a group of off-roaders to communicate on the trail. So, what's wrong with the CB then? Realistically, the only downfall of using a CB for trail comms is that they have poor extended range. At 4 watts of power for transmitting, you're limited to about a few miles under most conditions, and you have to have pretty good line of sight to get that. Also, CBs operate on AM, which is inferior to FM for sound quality. Also, some folks are getting their CB radios what we call peaked and tuned. A peaked and tuned CB radio has been modified to modulate at 100% rather than the 70% factory setting. You know, and it's been tuned to make sure that it's sending and receiving on the same frequency. If a good shop does the peak and tune on your CB, the difference in performance might be a little bit noticeable, but in reality, using the proper antenna and tuning the SWR on your CB will give you even better results. One of the biggest problems I see with CBs and off-road use is that 90% of the CB setups I see on the trail are not properly tuned. On some runs, it seems like I'm the only rig in the group that can transmit more than a few hundred yards. These same folks that didn't take the time to properly set up their CB won't be happy with their ham radio either. I mean, you got to set it up right. When you set up your CB, if you didn't use an SWR meter, you're probably leaving some performance on the table. Also, this transmits on AM, which the sound quality isn't as good as transmitting on FM, like getting a ham radio. But, you can improve that a little bit. I like to use a good noise-canceling microphone. Paired with my rig, everybody always comments that I come through really loud and clear. So this is a worthwhile upgrade to your CB. Also, stay away from really shitty CBs. I mean, I don't like those all-in-one units like the Cobra 75s or some of the others. Stay away from handheld CBs. These things don't transmit far at all. I mean, they're, for all intents and purposes, useless as for trail comms. Don't bother with the handheld CB radios. Also, buy a good quality CB rig for your Jeep or rock crawler. The classic is the Uniden 520. It's a great radio. Also, the Cobra 29, another great radio. This is my personal Uniden PC7 8 Elite. And I've ran this for probably about 10 years. It's been worked over a little bit by my friend Jericho. And this is a great rig if you're going to communicate on CB. So, you get your money's worth. But the basics of it is get a good unit, install it correctly, and get it properly tuned. And you might learn to like your CB. The overwhelming vast majority of off-roaders who use ham use 2 meters when they use a ham radio. Not only are there more 2-meter repeaters and simplex available, but 2 meter actually works better in an off-road environment than, let's say, the 70 centimeter band does. Also, a 2 meter radio will let you monitor the business band so you can listen at King of the Hammers and the Baja 1000. And with the Mars cap mod done to your radio, your 2 meter radio can be used to transmit and receive on the MERS frequencies. For these reasons, most off-roaders buy a 2 meter mobile unit rather than buying a more expensive dual band. 2 meter radio is all you'll ever need for off-roading. Where a CB is limited to 4 watts, a ham radio operator can blast out 1500 watts. Most mobile units, though, are capable of running 50, 75, or even 80 watts, like this radio right here, which absolutely blows any CB out of the water. Even with this radio set at 10 watts, the nice, clean FM signal of a ham radio frequency absolutely kills a CB radio in every regard. Before I go any further with using a VHF radio, let me clarify something here. You'll hear the use of the terms ham frequencies, business band frequencies, and MERS frequencies a lot in this video. Ham frequencies refer to the allotted amateur radio frequencies between 144 and 148 megahertz. This is the 2 meter band used by licensed ham radio operators. You must be a licensed operator to transmit on these frequencies. They get a great deal of use, so it's best to stay off these frequencies if you're not licensed and properly versed in radio etiquette. The so-called business band is the frequencies between 150 and 162 megahertz. These frequencies are for business and public safety. Each individual frequency in the business band requires a separate license to be purchased for use, and that license is only good for a 75-mile radius around the licensed location. Even if you're a licensed amateur radio operator, you need to buy a separate license to use a business band frequency. MERS frequencies are 5 frequencies within the business band that can be used by anyone without a license. MERS stands for Multi-Use Radio Service, and anyone of any age can use them for communications. If this sounds too good to be true, well, it kind of is. The huge drawback to using MURS frequencies is that it's illegal to transmit at over 2 watts on these channels. Basically, a well-tuned CB radio will often transmit better than 2 watts on the MURS frequencies will. Handheld ham radios, known as handy talkies, or HTs for short, are a popular first radio for many off-roaders. Just be mindful that the small power output and antenna limitations often give you less range than sometimes a well-tuned CB. I think this one transmits on 4 watts. This one does 5 watts. And I have another Befeng that does 8 watts, which is significantly less than your average mobile unit will put out. But, it's a good starter radio. And if you add a good quality aftermarket antenna to them, you can actually get a little bit more range out of these things. So they do come in handy. Since you're watching my video about trail comms, you've undoubtedly looked at other videos on YouTube about trail comms. And probably what you saw is those mall crawler overlander type guys driving around with one of these handheld ham radios with a rubber ducky antenna on it, reviewing how well it works. Well, that goes to show you how little those guys actually know. They don't know what they're talking about. They don't know what they're doing. They don't have even the fundamental knowledge of radio theory. A real ham would never drive around all over the place with a handy talkie and rubber ducky antenna and use it in their vehicle and expect any type of good performance out of it. If they used a handy talkie like this in their rig, they would undoubtedly hook it up to an externally mounted antenna to get at least some performance out of this. But using this inside the vehicle with this rubber ducky antenna, it's not going to perform very well. You need to just know that right off the bat. Also, besides the fact that these transmit on very low power, almost what a CB radio does, there's something else I don't particularly like about these handheld ham radios. And that's that they're extremely sensitive to RFI, to radio frequency interference. Basically, in a modern car, in a modern vehicle, it's just basically a hodgepodge of items emitting RFI inside the vehicle. And that really messes with the signal on these things. Also, when you're sitting inside a car, especially a car with a metal car body, for all intents and purposes, you're basically sitting inside a Faraday cage. And that really limits the ability of these radios to get out. Sometimes you'll notice when you're using these handhelds inside a vehicle on an off-road trip, you'll be sitting in the driver's seat trying to use this, and the signal will be really crappy, and then you'll stick your head out the window and it'll be good again. Then you'll bring your head back in and it'll be bad. Then you'll hand it to your passenger and he'll get good reception where he's sitting. But if the person in the back seat uses it, they get bad reception. Basically this is because these are extremely sensitive to RFI. And, when they're used in an enclosed metal vehicle, the signal's real wonky inside of it. So, these are great as a starter radio or a backup radio, or to use while you're out walking around, or to listen in on the races. But as far as a dedicated system that you're going to use in your off-road vehicle, you're much better off getting a good mobile unit with a hard-mounted antenna outside on a good ground plane, and that'll basically cancel out all that RFI interference and it won't be a problem. But when you're using these little handy talkies inside a vehicle, it's a real crapshoot. But, if you're serious about utilizing a ham radio for off-roading, you'll eventually want a mobile rig properly installed in your vehicle that can put out the watts when you need it. It's super nice to be able to, turn your radio down to 5 or 10 watts to talk to people on your group while you're crawling through a canyon. But it's also nice if you want, and I've done it several times, especially in Johnson Valley, to crank this puppy up to 75 watts, really put out some wattage, and even on simplex, talk to rigs back in camp so they can bring parts out to you. I've done that before in Johnson Valley. I've had to go up to the top of Fissure Mountain and talk to people down on the lake bed and have them run parts up to my group. So, that power output on the mobile unit really comes in handy. But with all these ham radios, here's the kicker. To take advantage of this awesomeness, you must be licensed to use a ham radio. The good news is that the test has never been easier to pass because you're no longer required to learn Morse code. And the technician test is only 35 questions. The bad news is that if you're not well versed on radio theory and FCC law, you need to study up before taking the test because you do have to pass it. Getting your ham radio card is well worth it in my opinion, as is learning how to fully use your ham radio. But unfortunately, this isn't a reality. Most off-roaders who get a ham radio are going to use it illegally and not till its full potential. Now here's the problem I see with these Jeepers that do this. And, correct me if I'm wrong, but all of us know people like this. That's the 90% of the guys out there who buy a ham radio on Amazon, 90% of the off-roaders who go out on Amazon and buy themselves a ham radio, they envision themselves being that hero, the guy who calls for help on his ham radio, in the middle of the wilderness to save the life of some pretty lady and just, some damsel in distress. Well, I have bad news for you. Until you learn the complicated process of finding, acquiring, and communicating with repeaters, you're never going to be that hero that calls for help. People who have the knowledge to use these and the expertise to use it also have a license to use it. The sad reality is that the vast majority of off-roaders who buy ham radios are going to use them as a glorified CB. 10-4, good buddy. They basically want to put it on a channel and talk to other rigs on the run with it. The problem is that when you use ham frequencies to chat on the trail, you'll be really annoying to licensed ham operators at best and accidentally screwing with repeaters or emergency services at worst. This is a very fast way to get tracked down and hit with a $10,000 fine. Unless you're a licensed operator, stay off the ham frequencies unless you have an emergency. Because of the risk of being noticed and fined by the FCC, many off-roaders get the Mars cap mod done to their mobile radios. The Mars cap mod basically requires opening up the faceplate and severing some connections or soldering together some connections. It's different depending on the radio. The Mars cap mod allows the radio to transmit out of the ham band on the business band and MERS frequencies. Although you're less likely to be caught and fined for using the business band at low wattage, it's still illegal to do it without paying for a license to use any of those frequencies. Basically, it's illegal to transmit on the business band even if you have your ham radio license. If you have a Chinese handheld handy-talkie, like a Belfang, you don't need the Mars cap mod on these to transmit on the business band. They already come capable of transmitting out of the ham frequencies. Which is why unlicensed people love these and most serious ham radio operators hate them. As of December 2019, the FCC is currently trying to make these radios illegal. So if you want one, buy it now. The upside to using the business band for trail comms is that you won't be interfering with ham radio activity, and you won't be accidentally keying repeaters, and the likelihood of being caught without a license is actually pretty slim if you stay off the ham band. This assumes that you stay off any frequencies that are used by local government or business. The fastest way to a $10,000 fine is to use the ham frequencies illegally. The downside to using the business band for trail comms is that it's illegal. I repeat, if you don't have a private land mobile radio license for the frequency that you're using in the geographic area you're using it in, you're breaking federal law. So if you're lucky enough to be with a group of 20 Jeeps on the trail who are all licensed ham radio operators legally communicating with each other, well, that's fantastic. But we all know that this isn't ever the case. I just want people to be mindful that they're engaging in illegal activity before they decide to do it. A race radio is a name coined by manufacturers such as Rugged Radios and PCI. A race radio is simply a commercial style radio that operates on a few different pre-programmed frequencies in the business band, and they can put out enough wattage for use at extended distances. Most of them put out about 50 watts. They're predominantly used by race teams so drivers can communicate with the pits and race ops. Companies like PCI and Rugged also integrate headsets for drivers and passengers into a package. These simple all-in-one packages are very popular in off-road racing. But because race radios use frequencies in the business band, the user must be licensed to use that frequency and can only use it in a 75-mile radius from the licensed location. This means that most race teams and most trail wheelers use their radios illegally. So when an off-road club gets all of its members race radios, they're most likely using them illegally. Will you get caught and fined for using a race radio without a license? Well, probably not, as long as you use a business band frequency that's not in use locally. Is it worth the risk? Well, that's up to you to decide. The benefits of using race radios is that they're super simple. They don't have any complex features and menus to navigate. You don't have to worry about finding frequencies. And, there's no complex programming involved. They're perfect for the racer that doesn't want to fumble around with knobs and features during a race. I guess they're also okay for a recreational wheeler, who just wants to use a high wattage radio to communicate vehicle to vehicle on the trail like a CB. The cons of a race radio is that you pay more money to get almost none of the benefits of a ham radio. And 99% of the people using these race radios are breaking the law, using them illegally, and risking a $10,000 fine anyway. For a recreational wheeler, in my opinion, race radios are a waste of money. And I know bubble pack radios are usually handheld radios that use FRS or GMRS frequencies. These radios are normally used for family activities. They call them bubble pack radios because they're often purchased as a set of walkie-talkies at places like Walmart or Dick's Sporting Goods, and they're usually packaged in a bubble pack. An FRS radio is basically a walkie-talkie that only transmits at 2 watts. The advantage to it is that it can be used without a license. The disadvantage is that the range is very limited on these. They're pretty much useless for use as any type of universal trail comm. Under brand new FCC regulations, any of these bubble pack two-way radios that transmit at over 2 watts are now considered to be GMRS devices, and a license must be purchased for their use. A GMRS radio can operate up to 50 watts on some channels, but it requires a license to use. Because they are simple walkie-talkies that have better range, GMRS radios are great for places like the family farm or for a family hunting trip. A GMRS radio doesn't have the features of a true ham radio, or basically any features of any ham radio, but it still requires a license to use. For this reason, you might as well just buy a ham radio for your off-road rig. In the end, there really is no great legal option for large groups of off-roaders, so don't throw away that CB radio just yet. In my Jeep, I have both a CB radio and my ham radio with the Mars Cap mod done to it. This way I have all my bases covered as far as communications go. My Jeep is a soft top with a removable top. And what you'll find on these, the difficulty with mounting a ham radio system is that you can't get a good ground plane. You know, if I had a good metal roof in the middle like most trucks do, I can get an excellent ground plane, but on a Jeep it's hard. And I tried a lot of different places. You know, I tried up front near the bumper right there. You know, I've tried all the way in the back. And I tried in various different places. And the best place I could find as a compromise is right here. You know, on top of this, I bought this Poison Spider light bar mount right here. And I actually found that I get the most decent ground plane off of that. So, although the system isn't perfect, if you have a Jeep or something similar with a soft top on it, you're going to have to make compromises. And this is my CB radio rig. It's a Uniden PC78 Elite. Probably one of the best Uniden CB radios ever made. They don't make them anymore. And I think this is before they moved production out to the Philippines. And this is a really nice full-featured radio. And, you know, it's been worked over by Jericho. And he did a real good job on it. This CB's 11 years old now. That's right. It's been in my Jeep for 11 years. And it still works like brand new. Since none of the rock buggies I run with run a CB radio in their buggy, they all run 2 meter. In my rock buggy, I'm running a Yaesu FT2900R rig. And it's been a real good rig in my rock buggy. Had it in here for about, I don't know, 7-8 years, and it's been totally problem-free. My rock buggy has a metal roof on it, which greatly simplifies things when you're trying to get a good ground plane. And basically, I mounted my antenna smack dab in the middle of that metal roof. And the system actually sounds and works very good. I basically didn't have to make any compromises on antenna mounting with this like I did with my Jeep. For most off-roaders, you basically have 3 choices for trail communication. You could stick to your tried and true CB radio, which is easy, cheap, and legal for everybody. You know, and you can, with cell phone reception nowadays, you can use your cell phone for emergencies. I mean, basically, I get cell reception everywhere with Verizon. Or you can get your ham radio license and hope that everybody else you wheel with does too. But you know, you need to accept the fact that you will probably be the only one able to legally use ham frequencies. I currently wheel with about 100 people, and only 2 of us have our license. Or you can get a race radio, or do the Mars Cap mod on your ham, and talk in the business band, you know, and break the law, risking a $10,000 fine. Or you could do the Mars Cap mod, use the MERS frequencies at 2 watts, be legal, but then wonder why you even got rid of your CB. I know in this video, I use the word illegal a lot, and it comes across harsh, but I'm really not trying to be condescending or a dick in any way. I'm just basically pointing out the facts. You know, this video is about harsh reality. And the harsh reality is that if you're using a race radio or a ham radio and you're not a licensed amateur radio operator or you're not licensed on a particular frequency to use at a particular location in the business band, you are using your race radios and ham radios illegally. But don't let that discourage you. It's really worth it getting into ham radio and learning everything about radio theory. If anything else, just studying up and passing that simple 35 question technician test to get your ham card is well worth it. And, it'll have you on the road to not only legally communicating with on the trail with your ham radio, but it'll also give you a better understanding of how to set your system. Well, I really hope you enjoyed my video and found it informative. Thanks for watching. And as always, keep the rubber side down.